This week's Torah portion is well known, not only for the passage which you chanted so confidently and expertly, Mia, the very succinct 6-verse summary of our Jewish story, a wandering Aramean was my father, or as you rather sensitively put, on Thursday in our rehearsal, a wandering Armenian was my father, which led to all sorts of thoughts about the wandering Albanian was my father, and all sorts of other names. But it's also well known for two other significant sections, one of which I've already mentioned. The first is a series of about 10 verses known as the brachot, the blessings. If you keep the commandments which God enjoins upon you, then God will set you high above the nations of the earth. You'll be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. Your animals will produce calves and lambs, your fields abundant produce, rain will water your land in its due season, and you'll be rewarded with offspring and prosperity. This is a vision of what the Torah terms as success. The second section is a much longer series of more than 50 verses that follow on from these blessings, and they outline the curses that will befall Israel if the people fail to keep God's commandments. In graphic detail, the Torah describes the consequences of humanity's indifference and failure to observe the terms of the Torah. Blight cast on city and country, calamity, panic, frustration, pestilence, fever, scorching heat and drought, war and oppression, hunger, disease, madness, blindness, and many others. Everything promised in the blessings will suffer a reversal and more, until eventually the people will suffer annihilation from the land. These, as you can imagine, are not easy verses to read or hear, not only because of the false nature of the theology. If you obey the commandments, all will be well. If you disobey the commandments, then the very plagues visited upon the Egyptians will be visited upon you. But because they speak of human failure as the cause of disease, natural disaster, poverty, violence, and war, and every other calamity included here in these verses. And of course, to some extent, we might say today, humanity is responsible for certain failures in the world. We are responsible for the climate emergency, for the uncontrolled heating of our planet and its extreme weather. We are responsible for the vast inequalities in society, for poverty, for lack of housing and security, for man-made catastrophes, violence, and war. Sometimes we are responsible for the personal failures of not living up to our abilities, to our potential, of caving into weakness and laziness. Our collective responsibility for others is as important as the obligations we have towards ourselves and our immediate circle of family, friends, and colleagues. In just a few weeks' time, our Yom Kippur liturgy will ask us how we have fulfilled our personal obligations and our duties to the community, the Jewish community, diminished by persecution and weakened by assimilation. It will ask of us how we have used sufficiently the opportunities to alleviate suffering, to speak out against injustice, to promote neighborliness in the collective life of our community, in our city, in our country, in the family of nations. We are conditioned to think of failure in our own lives as something shameful and bad, something to hide from others in case we're portrayed in a poor light, failing an exam or the 11 plus, failing your driving test, having to redo university or qualification exams, failing in a relationship with a partner, divorce, failing as a parent, failing to fit in, failing at work. The list can become endless and a frightening litany when we think about the obstacles that can cause us to stumble and fail. When the Lionesses lost the World Cup to Spain in Sydney just a couple of weeks ago, the headlines were full of expressions such as heartbreak, luck running out, an unfortunate end, defeat, and tragedy. But this kind of failure, if you can call it such, wasn't a calamity, it wasn't a tragedy, but rather an opportunity, in Elizabeth Day's words, to build up the muscle of people's emotional resilience. And actually, to my mind, it was a triumph for both teams who reached the final and played to the absolute best of their abilities. Amy Edmondson, in a recent article entitled "Why We Need to Learn to Fail Better," asks, what if we could learn to habitually reframe failure as a source of discovery and personal development? What if we could face problems and setbacks with honesty, determination, and a healthy sense of realism? What if failure, as a token of our shared humanity, provided us with feelings of inclusion, not ostracism? I'm curious how our Jewish tradition sees failure and what specific Hebrew words are used to capture the phenomenon of lack of success, disappointment, collapse, and ruin. The Hebrew word for failure is similar to the Latin, medieval French, and other linguistic terms, which all come from a word meaning to fall, to stumble, to lose one's step. In Hebrew, kishalon. So failure is seen in one light as a stumbling, a fall that can invite criticism and scorn from others, and shame and loss of confidence in ourselves. But there is another term in Hebrew which is connected to the idea of falling, or rather letting go, and that comes from the Hebrew root shin mem tet, shamat. The verb means to let drop, or to let something fall. But what I find interesting is that we are familiar with this word, not in connection with failure, but something very different. The book of Deuteronomy refers to shmitah, the noun from this verb, in relation to the remission of debts every 7 years. Creditors are required to annul any loans that are owed to them. The purpose is to redress certain economic inequities at regular intervals, cancel the debt every 7 years, and poverty can be averted, says the Torah. And there's a second use of this word, which is found in the book of Exodus. V'sheish shanim tizra et artsecha, v'yasafta et tevuata, v'hashvi'it tishmatena. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but in the 7th you shall let it rest and lie fallow. Let the needy among your people eat of it. Failing to sow your land, failing to gather its yield, allowing it to lie fallow every 7 years is hardly an act of failure. Cancelling the debts of the poor These things are about taking a step back and resetting the standards of social justice by helping the land to renew itself, not by exploitation, but through rest, through letting alone. And if we translate that into our own lives, the moments we might see as failure or inadequacy, these can offer us opportunities to step back and ask ourselves, what is really important in life? Is it the GCSE or A-level exam results? Is it how we look, the job we secure for ourselves, or how we fit in or don't fit into our social circle? Or is it something else? Failing is about taking risks, says Amy Edmondson. Inventors, scientists, chefs, and entrepreneurs take smart risks that are essential to our discovery. They do this for a living. Without those risks, we would not develop sophisticated and sometimes successful treatments for cancer, in surgery, and in other areas. Failure, stumbling, letting go, standing back from ourselves and from the world engenders humility, realism, and often healing. It allows us to stop, to disrupt our routines and our attitudes, and to reset our moral compass and readjust ourselves to the realities of the world. Mia, on behalf of all of us here, I want to congratulate you on the really superb way you prepared for your bat mitzvah with Matt, the dedicated hard work that you invested in your preparation with his support, and I know with the support of your parents as well. From keeping your head down in class Chet last year, which I was privileged to teach, refusing to read Hebrew, suddenly one day I discovered that Mia had blossomed into this full-blown flower, reading and contributing, and I saw how empowered you were through that conscientious and hard work. Today is a significant moment of transition for you as you become bat mitzvah. But actually, that transition has been happening over these past few months. And although friends and summer camp and ballet and netball are all important elements of your life, as you wrote in your Devar Torah, so too is your commitment to the wider community and our own Jewish community here at the LJS. Both you, Mia, and Emma exemplify an impressive commitment to Jewish education and community, and I have no doubt that comes from the example of your parents and wider family. Mazal tov to you, mazal tov to all your family,